Oilers Now digital content is sponsored by Legacy Heating and Cooling. No payments and no interest for a year. That's how you build a legacy.
Hello, Pierre. How you doing?
I'm all right, Bob. Thanks for having me back on.
Yes, we are in Edmonton for all of about 48 hours here. It's basically an 8-game road trip, and I'm not going to BS you. It wasn't pretty. The team stole a game in New York because Stuart Skinner played great. Got significantly outplayed, mismanaged the puck in front of Julien Brisebois on Thursday night in Long Island. Evan Bouchard had a rough one. The New Jersey Devils were quick. They were fast. The Oilers weren't sharp. And the Devils took them to the woodshed on Saturday, and then they had no juice in the second of a back-to-back in front of Doug Armstrong on the Sunday. I don't think it's going to affect Connor McDavid since he's already been named to the team, but it was an interesting week nonetheless. You've penned a piece on the pressure of managing Team Canada, and perhaps you can shed some of the insights you gleaned from some of the people you spoke to our fans here.
Yeah, it was a fun piece to put together. I chatted with Steve Yzerman and Wayne Gretzky recently about their experiences as GM of the Olympic men's team and, you know, the pressure that comes with it. And it's funny, as you often see, Bob, with time, I think both have become more comfortable kind of, acknowledging what we obviously thought was the case at the time, but you always downplay it at the time. But they both talked about how they felt really huge amounts of pressure, being in charge of the Canadian Olympic team. And, it's funny, some people commented to my column, well, there's so much talent in Canada, how can you get it wrong? I think you have to look closely at the comments that both Yzerman and Gretzky shared, is that they felt the weight of a nation. And obviously in Gretzky's case, it was 50-year gold medal drought in men's hockey, and they really felt that in Salt Lake City, and it was just interesting to hear him all these years later, spell out how the relief of winning in that gold medal game against the U.S., but also back to your point about Doug Armstrong and Julien Brisebois being in rinks here at. This is the time, as Yzerman said, where there's pressure too, because you're really narrowing your list and trying to, minimize how many decisions you have left right up to December 31st, and I get that. People keep saying it's early in the season. Doug Armstrong and the management staff are meeting November 10th here in Toronto, the day before an NHL GM's meeting. And they plan to come out of that GM's meeting with a cut-down list for Team Canada. Not right down to 25, but certainly cut down. They don't want to go into December being at plus 10. I think that they want to minimize what's left to decide. So these games right now, you might say it's October. Well, they're pretty important auditions for everyone that's on the bubble.
Yeah. Pierre LeBrun joining us right now. Pierre is also our Oilers Now headliner today for Wilhauk Beef Jerky. Others can try to imitate, but nobody can duplicate the great flavor of Wilhauk Beef Jerky, only available in Leduc, Alberta. We've probably had Doug Armstrong on more than any other general manager over the years here on Oilers Now. So I did have a brief conversation with him and joked with him. Well, when you manage Team Canada in anything, we're with you win or win. And that's kind of the expectation, right? So,
yeah. My line in my column was win or else.
Yeah. And that just kind of comes with the territory. It is interesting. Stan Bowman, as you know, is part of the Bill Guerin's management team with USA Hockey as well. So, a couple things. We did the Battle of Alberta Golf Tournament this summer. Theron Fleury was there. And I know to this day, Theron, and people can think what they want about us, he's not the quietest guy on Twitter. But there were people in hockey that had a lot of time for Theron. He went through a brutal journey. His book is one of the most well-read hockey books ever written. Right. And I brought up, with Theron, and when we did our hot stove down in Red Deer for the Battle of Alberta Golf Tournament, just what it meant to him to have Wayne Gretzky stick up for him. right? Remember that sequence? You were there, and it was Wayne basically, in a somewhat un-Wayne-like way to a certain, like he dug his heels in and showed his fangs a bit and stuck up for Canada, and I was like, that's awesome. I can't imagine what it'd be like because Theo Fleury was part of the reason why he stuck up, for Canada, and I was just, I think it was an awesome moment, right?
There was a lot more to it than that. I mean, I was sitting in the third row and press row for that news conference in Salt Lake City, and I think Canada just tied the Czechs.
Yes.
So it was actually a decent game, and but really, apropos of nothing, Wayne went off on the tirade of all tirades, and over time, I mean, it's come out that what he was trying to do, because Canada started that Olympic tournament getting clobbered by Sweden 5-2, could have been 10-2. And so Wayne was trying to shield the players from the scrutiny and the pressure of the 50-year drought. And it had that effect for 24 hours. All everyone was talking about was the usually mild-mannered Wayne Gretzky going off the rails in quite a rant. And honestly, from there, Canada never looked back. But yeah, that was. I wasn't quite sure what I was hearing and seeing when it was starting to happen in front of my eyes.
Well, wasn't there a sequence involving Fleury where there was a non-call and he'd been,
Yeah, there was something. I mean, the whole rant started with Canada not getting called and so on, and it basically us against the world. Everyone hates Canada was the famous quote.
Yeah,
and so on. But really, there was a deeper, I think, design to it all, because the pressure was. I mean, honestly, you could feel it being there in Salt Lake. I mean, how could they? When the NHL players first went in the Olympics in Nagano, I think there was some arrogance among all Canadian hockey fans. Well, of course, Canada's going to win. We're finally there. We finally have the best players in the Olympics. It's like the Canada Cup now, except it's got an Olympic medal attached to it. And, of course, we know what happened in Nagano. So the pressure going into Salt Lake City was crazy. Right. And, in fact, I mentioned this in my piece in The Athletic, but the fallout from Nagano on top of a bad World Junior showing was that there was this thing called the Molson Open Ice Summit, where all the great hockey thinkers were there. Bob Nicholson, of course, from Canada was part of it, but Gretzky, I mean, all these different people came to Toronto in the August of 1999 for a full-fledged summit about what's wrong with the Canadian game. It was intense, and the alarm had been sounded about, so that was the temperature going into Salt Lake City, just to add a layer to it all.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you right now, and I've said this on this show, when it comes to the World Juniors, I think we pick a team not to offend anybody else. And we've taken sort of a little bit of the physicality and a little bit of the Canadian intimidation. There was always a perception, like, don't get me wrong, Canada's got a ton of skill. They can match up with anybody. But part of what was Canada's identity was that they did have physical players that were prepared and had a lot of heart and character. And the way the games we've seen, I think, Pierre, internationally with the IIHF, an emphasis on the officials. And not all those officials have grown up in the North American style. And I get very exasperated watching it. And here's where I ask you the question. Number one, specific to the Olympics, who's officiating in the Olympics?
So that gets decided, I know there were NHL refs at the last NHL participated Olympics, so I assume the same. I haven't checked this,
okay.
But we've had NHL refs at past Olympic games, so I don't know why that would be different. But now that you've asked me live on air, I will go out and check tomorrow.
I just I don't love what I see.
To your point,
yes, go ahead.
But to your point, and it always hasn't been, and obviously, the way the game. This actually came up in the conversation I had with the GM this week about the Olympics, and we were talking about different things, and he said, the way the U.S. and Canada played that game at the Bell Center, that's not happening, obviously, at the Olympics. You can't, never mind the 3 fights in 9 seconds. Obviously, that's not happening. But even some of the big hits, I think that everyone's going to be careful knowing that everything is called tighter with international rules. So, and I wonder, how much of that goes into the guys you're picking. Now, the actual ice surface is going to be NHL ice, not international ice.
Right.
But it's a great point you have that everything will be called tighter.
I just think of, we were in Montreal. We had an Oilers Now road trip there. I looked at Cam Moon, and I saw Tkachuk and Hagel, and I looked right at Cam and said, we should have had Tom Wilson on this team.
You're not the only one who thought that. I had a few text messages from NHL people saying, imagine if Tom Wilson was on the ice. Yeah.
Not sure it would have quite escalated the way it did, which is not to say that I didn't thoroughly enjoy it. I thought it was great, and I knew the Tkachuks weren't going to back down, especially Brady, because he is legit. All right, New Jersey. The Oilers, here's what New Jersey's got a real good team. They got a quick, fast team. Yeah. They got to get the Markstrom situation resolved in the future. I'll be intrigued to see what happens there. And I know you talked to Tom Fitzgerald. He has a team, to me, like the Oilers didn't lean on the Devils at all. There was no physicality in that game. Am I off base by saying New Jersey might be a little bit unproven here come playoff time, because there has been tendencies of teams to try to, bang them a bit physically and get inside the jerseys of their skill players?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the game plan for other teams, but last year's Devil team was not really their team. They were so banged up, and that happens, and they weren't really able to overcome it, especially the injury to Jack Hughes. So, outside of Markstrom, they're banged up again, but not as much as they were last year. They just hope that their core guys are all ready to go this time around. They, in that interview I did with Tom Fitzgerald, I think he tried his best to downplay, but I think he couldn't help himself. I mean, he talked about we need a deep run this year. Like, the internal expectations are really high within that organization. They think they have a real team. To your point, come playoff time, do they have enough of that physicality? They have immense skill. They have a ton of the puck when they're playing well. I think that's why they traded for Paul Cotter from Vegas. I think they absolutely, Glendening. So they've tried to address that in their bottom six.
Even Hallinan last night did an okay job in that fight.
Yeah, and they have a tremendously talented mobile blue line too. So a lot of the pieces are there. I think Jack Hughes, it's kind of lazy of me to say this today after a hat trick for him here in Toronto, but I would have said this a week ago if you asked me. If he stays healthy, I think this is the big Jack Hughes year, where maybe wins our Ross.
He's got like 300 points in his last 250 games. Like, he's a hell of a player.
It's just he has to stay healthy, yeah. So, to me, Washington, I think, will drop off a bit, not as dramatically as some people predict, but I think it's Carolina or New Jersey for the Metro. And I think the Devils are as skilled as anyone in the East, quite frankly.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Pierre LeBrun, brought to you by Riverside Honda and Skidoo. It's your dream. Ride it at Riverside. I believe that the owner has to be the person that commits to a rebuild. And it was on this show back in February of 2010, that Edmonton Oilers owner Daryl Cates said, let's face it, Bob, we're going to be in a rebuild here. Okay? And I looked down to the team from the South. They can't score. The goaltender probably camouflaged some of their weaknesses. They did finish tied in points with St. Louis with 96. They would have made the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, but they had a minus 13 goal differential, and they're already worse than that to start this year. Can you foresee? Do you think Calgary would commit to a rebuild, or do you think they're going to try to tweak it a bit? What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, I don't foresee a full rebuild. As it is, they've gotten younger anyway the last few years with the pieces they have moved out, right? But I think I don't think ownership signs off on a full rebuild there. I think it's more about transitioning and so on. And to be fair, Bob, I don't know a lot of organizations that in 2025 believe in the full drop a grenade rebuild.
Yep.
A lot of what you're seeing today is trying to, get younger and get draft picks, but also, In fact, I had this conversation with Matthew Darsh, who's the new GM of the Islanders before the season, and he said one of the first decisions he had to make with ownership was his vision, and he said, we're not rebuilding here. He said, we're going to get younger. I mean, by definition, they got the number one pick off to an unbelievable start in their lineup right now. He's 18, but he said to me, I don't believe in full rebuilds either. He said the modern game is more about transitioning your roster, yes, but having veteran players around to make sure that everyone's doing the right thing. So I'm not saying that Calgary will end up being where they need to get over the next few years, but what I'm saying is they're not alone in not wanting to go into a path where you're dropping a full grenade.
Well, the plan in Edmonton was never to have gone through what they went through from, 2010 to 2016. But I'm sure glad it happened because it helped them get Draisaitl in 14 and McDavid in 15. And I know, they probably could have had a better run in 17 if a couple things had panned out. Had a little bit of a challenge there in 18 and 19, and then have been pretty good since then. Pierre, love having you on the show. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, just a quick thought, is Washington has avoided going into a 10-year purgatory with an aging core. They've done a great job on the play.
Yeah.
And that's the model that a lot of teams are looking at.
You nailed it. Hey, awesome. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Pierre.
Brad, thanks, bud.